In the morning mist, a white two-story colonial house stood quietly. The crisp June morning light gently illuminated the well-tended roses in the garden. Deep pink Queen Elizabeth and pure white iceberg roses swayed in the breeze, glistening with morning dew. The sunrise reflected on the window panes created beautiful patterns of light, almost like stained glass. In this serene morning scene, Linda was already up and about. At 33, she carried herself with a grace that belied her age, methodically going through her morning routine. The white ceramic mug from the cupboard filled with the aroma of Starbucks dark roast coffee. Whole wheat bread popped from the toaster was carefully spread with organic butter, accompanied by a parfait of fresh blueberries and yogurt. This was breakfast for her husband, Thomas. Linda meticulously groomed herself in front of the mirror. Her navy-tailored jacket and cream blouse from Nordstrom spoke of her profession as an accountant at a financial firm. She neatly arranged her black hair and put on modest pearl earrings. Every gesture revealed her methodical and practical nature. However, in her vanity drawer lay fertility medications, neatly arranged. 2 years of treatment had undoubtedly taken their toll on her mind and body. Yet her determination to stay positive was characteristic of someone who had grown up carrying her parents' expectations. Upstairs in the study, her husband Thomas was already at his computer screen. As an IT consultant, he often worked from home. Though naturally mild-mannered and introverted, he had recently been feeling an invisible loneliness from his limited social interaction. While their marriage appeared harmonious on the surface, the pressure of fertility treatments weighed heavily on his mind as well. And now, the house had a new resident, Linda's sister, Caitlin. Recently divorced and currently unemployed, she had moved back home for financial reasons. Her free-spirited and self-centered nature contrasted sharply with her sister Linda's. Yet beneath that lay deep wounds. From childhood, Caitlin had always been compared to her sister. With their parents' expectations consistently directed at Linda, and unable to match her sister's academic achievements, Caitlin gradually developed deep-seated feelings of inferiority. These feelings now lurked in her heart as complex jealousy toward her sister. Linda and Thomas had met 6 years ago at a mutual friend's wedding, dating for a year before marriage. When her parents moved to a retirement home, Linda, as the eldest daughter, inherited the family house. This inheritance came with the responsibility of helping with her parents' retirement home expenses. The couple built a stable life and began their new chapter in this house. However, after their 3rd year of marriage, they began fertility treatments. 2 years of treatment had subtly affected their relationship. The high cost of treatments strained their finances, and the side effects of hormone therapy took their toll on Linda's physical and mental well-being. What was once natural conversation between husband and wife gradually diminished. Their weekend brunches out, once a regular occurrence, had become increasingly rare. Even with more time spent across the dinner table from each other, conversation had become minimal. A husband trying to avoid the topic of fertility treatments, and a wife who sensed this but couldn't bring it up. The silence flowing between them steadily widened their emotional distance. Thomas immersed himself in work to avoid reality, while Linda tried to dispel her anxiety by maintaining perfect housework and job performance. In their seemingly unchanged daily life, the emotional distance between them grew slowly but surely. Still, Linda tried to maintain hope. Her careful morning preparations, meticulous housework, and dedicated approach to her job, everything seemed like preparation for a happy future that might someday arrive. However, at this point, Linda didn't yet know that this peaceful daily life would gradually but surely crumble with her sister's return. Caitlin returned home on a rainy Sunday afternoon, carrying just a small suitcase and a designer leather tote bag. Her divorce was triggered by her husband's financial collapse. After failing in real estate investments, her husband had disappeared, leaving behind debt. Faced with joint loan and credit card payments, she had been forced to give up her luxury condominium. "I'd like to stay here for a while," Caitlin had said at the time, showing unusual humility, her usual arrogant attitude subdued. Her designer dress had lost its former luster. The emotional impact of divorce and sudden life changes had cast a deep shadow over her expression. For the first few weeks, Caitlin tried to quietly adapt to her new life in the family home. She would wake up early to help with simple household chores, browsing job sites while her anxiety about the future grew. However, as she observed her sister's married life, it gradually became an object of envy. The well-maintained garden, the meticulously organized rooms, and above all, the stable living foundation. The reality that this house, once her parents', now belonged to her sister began to slowly eat away at her. Her childhood feelings of inferiority began to resurface. Then, changes began to occur. It started with small things. After Linda left for work, Caitlin began preparing special brunches for Thomas, who remained at home. Salads made with organic vegetables from Whole Foods, homemade smoothies. Thomas, feeling lonely working from home, gradually began to appreciate such thoughtful gestures from his sister-in-law. Her help with housework also steadily increased Caitlin's influence. Her flexible approach to housework seemed to brighten the home's atmosphere more than Linda's meticulous cleaning. On weekends, the three would go shopping at Target and Whole Foods, where Caitlin naturally became the center of conversation. Meanwhile, Linda's place in the home gradually diminished. When she returned from work, dinner preparations were already complete, with unfamiliar dishes on the table. She increasingly found her husband and sister engaged in conversations about topics unknown to her. The stress of fertility treatments continued to weigh on Linda. Clinic visits, hormone injections, and the repeated cycle of hope and disappointment. The home that should have been a place to heal from this fatigue had somehow become an uncomfortable space. Conversations between husband and wife decreased even further. At breakfast, Thomas would quickly turn to his computer, and at dinner, though the three ate together, Caitlin dominated the conversation. Even on weekends, their former brunch dates had been replaced by trips to local farmers markets, suggested by Caitlin. Thomas's loneliness had surely transformed into an affinity for Caitlin. During the long hours of working from home, they were alone together. Coffee breaks between work naturally became their special time together. Meanwhile, changes that Linda couldn't notice were progressing quietly but surely. Evening time in the living room was also filled with discomfort. Though they watched television, no one really looked at the screen. Each carried unspoken thoughts. Linda focused on work documents, Thomas immersed himself in his smartphone, and Caitlin absently flipped through magazines. Beneath the surface calm, there was a sense that something was surely crumbling. Weekend routines had clearly changed as well. The walking trail excursions that used to be for the couple now included all three, or sometimes just Thomas and Caitlin would go, saying Linda was tired from treatments. Sunday church services at First Community Church became a routine for just husband and sister when Linda began staying home due to her condition. The awkward atmosphere in the house grew thicker day by day. Superficial conversations, unnatural laughter, and intentionally avoided glances. The most sensitive to these changes was, in fact, Linda, who should have been the lady of the house. However, she had lost someone to confide her anxieties to. Her parents were living peacefully in their retirement home, and she didn't want to worry them. She hesitated to tell her close friends about her family issues regarding her sister's divorce. And in Caitlin's heart, Her jealousy of her sister was quietly but surely transforming into a desire for revenge. While outwardly playing the role of a caring sister, inside she harbored a growing desire to take everything from her sister. It was the moment when years of childhood feelings were about to materialize. That day began like any other morning. Linda woke up before her 6 a.m. alarm as usual. She showered, applied her makeup, and prepared her husband's breakfast. Everything was part of her daily routine. Only today, she felt an urge to leave the house a little earlier than usual. For some reason, that feeling had sprouted within her. Work at the accounting firm proceeded as usual. Checking quarterly financial reports, corresponding with clients via email, training new employees. Though her concentration wavered more than usual during the afternoon meeting, she tried to convince herself it was just a side effect of the fertility treatments. However, when she checked her mobile phone during lunch break, she noticed there were no messages from Thomas. While they had become less frequent lately, there had always been casual communications like, "What's for lunch today?" At 3 p.m., Linda requested to leave early, citing health reasons. It was something she would never normally consider, but she couldn't suppress the urge to return home. Her navy pumps from Nordstrom felt heavier than usual. As she approached the White House in the quiet Upper Arlington residential area, her heartbeat quickened. Even the usually beautiful rose fragrance seemed oddly irritating today. Linda paused at the front door and took a deep breath. Looking at the A. Wilson engraved on the nameplate, she reached for the doorknob. The house was wrapped in an unusual silence. The moment she opened the living room door, the scene burst into view. Thomas sitting on the sofa, with Caitlin beside him. Their expressions held something challenging. The clock showed 4 p.m. Normally, the three of them would never be together at this time. "Welcome home, big sister." Caitlin's voice had a different ring to it than usual. In that moment, Linda instinctively knew something was happening. "We need to talk." The atmosphere in the living room suddenly became tense. Thomas kept his gaze fixed on the floor, while only Caitlin wore an inappropriately smug smile. "Sister, I'm pregnant. With Thomas's child." Those words broke the heavy silence. "A barren failure like you should just leave. This house belongs to our family now." Caitlin's voice mixed with hatred she had suppressed for years. Thomas continued, as if following a script. "It's your fault we couldn't get pregnant. Let's get divorced." At that moment, all the previous feelings of unease connected in Linda's mind. She slowly opened her mouth. "About that child." With those words, the room's atmosphere changed. Linda continued in a calm voice. "Caitlin, is your pregnancy real?" It wasn't just a simple question. Linda began calmly pointing out her observations one by one. "Last week, I found a pregnancy test box in the bathroom trash. But there was no used test stick. Instead, you've been buying menstrual products every month." Caitlin's expression tensed slightly. "You pretend to wake up with morning sickness at night, but the next morning you eat eggs and bacon normally. If you really had morning sickness, that wouldn't be possible." Thomas's eyes turned to Caitlin. "There's no change in food preferences typical of pregnant women. And your morning sickness conveniently only shows at night. During the day, when you're alone with him, you're perfectly fine." Each observation cut like a sharp blade, distorting their expressions. "Thomas, why don't you check?" "Her stomach." At those words, Thomas looked at Caitlin with a confused expression. He seemed to be realizing for the first time that he might have been deceived. Hesitantly, he reached for Caitlin's stomach. That's when it happened. A soft cushion appeared from under Caitlin's dress. The room's atmosphere froze instantly. Thomas lost his words and stepped back several paces. Caitlin desperately tried to say something, but no voice came out. Only Linda stood quietly. "Caitlin, this is..." Thomas's voice trembled. He shook his head repeatedly, as if unable to accept the reality before him. "No. This is..." Caitlin tried to cover up, but excuses were no longer effective. The cushion had rolled onto the floor, lying quietly in the center of the living room as if symbolizing the lies and deception of the moment. Linda maintained her composure as she looked at them both. Her wedding ring caught the light of the setting sun streaming through the window, glinting faintly. The days they had accumulated in this house ran through her mind like a series of flashbacks. And everyone realized that from this moment on, nothing would ever return to how it was. Thomas wandered his gaze between Caitlin and Linda in confusion. I wanted to be with Caitlin. When I heard about the baby, I thought I could finally have my own family. Linda's expression twisted momentarily at those words. Thomas continued. You were tired from fertility treatments. But with Caitlin, I wasn't lonely at home. I thought we could have a child together, but this is different. Caitlin cried out. We truly love each other. The baby was, yes, I lied about that, but my feelings are real. Thomas collapsed onto the sofa, holding his head. To think I was being deceived, what have I been doing? That's enough, both of you. Linda's quiet voice dominated the room. The evening light gently illuminated her profile. Thomas, you just wanted to escape the pressure of fertility treatments. Caitlin, you just wanted to validate yourself by destroying my life. At these words, both were left speechless. Struck by the truth, they could only stand there. The living room clock continued to tick quietly. No one could break this silence anymore. A long silence continued. The clock's second hand marked the heavy stillness. Eventually, Caitlin spoke in a trembling voice. I always admired you. Her voice no longer held its former arrogance. Looking at the cushion rolled on the floor, she continued. Sister was perfect. In studies, work, marriage. Parents always said, Linda would do it this way. Tears rolled down her cheeks. However, flames of hatred still burned in her eyes. I decided when I came back to this house. I would take everything. Your home, your happiness, this house, make it all mine. Caitlin began revealing her plan. How she had taken advantage of Thomas's loneliness, gradually closing the distance between them. How she had pretended to be pregnant to mentally corner Linda, who was struggling with infertility. And ultimately, how she had planned to gain rights to the house. After losing everything in my divorce, I had nothing left to lose. But you had everything. All of that, all of it. Thomas remained slumped, covering his face with both hands. After a while, he too opened his heavy mouth. Linda, I'm truly sorry. I wanted to escape the pressure of fertility treatments, but I didn't know about the fake pregnancy. I believed Caitlin was really pregnant. His voice was filled with regret and self-loathing. I was lonely working from home. Caitlin was cheerful and easy to talk to, before I knew it, already, but I never knew such a lie had been planned. Linda listened quietly to their confessions. Then she slowly stood up. I have only one thing to say. Her voice was surprisingly calm. "Leave this house by tomorrow." It was an unwavering decision. Linda decided to report to her parents at First Community Village herself. After hearing the details over the phone, her mother sighed deeply and said, "Caitlin, to think she would go this far." Her father could barely contain his anger. "Linda, your decision is right. The house is yours. Caitlin no longer has the right to return to this family home." Her parents' support lightened Linda's heart a little. However, there were still many realities she needed to face. Explanations to relatives needed to be handled carefully. Particularly, dealing with uncles and cousins who gathered every Thanksgiving would be difficult. While the truth needed to be told, consideration for the family's reputation was also necessary. Rumors had already begun spreading in the quiet residential area of Upper Arlington. Sister rivalry and husband's infidelity. Sunday services at First Community Church might be awkward for a while. However, Linda was prepared. She decided to carry herself with dignity even when meeting neighborhood wives while shopping at Tremont Center. She would accept rumors as rumors and continue walking her own path. The divorce mediation with her husband proceeded quietly. Thomas had no intention of contesting the rights to the house. Perhaps it was his way of making amends. Caitlin moved to Dayton where their parents' friends lived. She would never return to this house again. That was the result of her own actions. When visiting First Community Village, her mother quietly held Linda's hand. "You still have so many possibilities ahead of you." Linda nodded slightly at those words. Indeed, this wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. The roses in the well-tended garden continued to bloom beautifully. The morning light in this house was beginning to take on a different hue. It would take time to heal her wounded heart. But she could move forward, one step at a time, with certainty. The wind announcing autumn's arrival had begun to shake the street trees of Upper Arlington. 3 months had passed since that day, and the leaves were gradually beginning to change color. Linda's new life was also slowly taking shape. The divorce mediation progressed more smoothly than expected. Thomas agreed without contest to transfer the house rights to Linda. He had requested a company transfer and was assigned to the Seattle branch. When they finally signed the papers together, Thomas said in a small voice, "I'm sorry for what I did to you. But I think this is the best way." His belongings were packed in cardboard boxes and carried out by movers. The furniture they had chosen together and their wedding photo albums were stored in the attic. A new life needed new memories. The confirmation of her rights to the family home proceeded smoothly, backed by her parents' strong support. During visits to her parents at First Community Village, her father had arranged the paperwork with a lawyer. "This house is yours to protect now. Our memories live on with you." Linda steadily built her career at the accounting firm, putting her qualifications to good use. With support from her colleagues, she was selected as the leader of a new project. Her income increased, establishing a foundation for financial independence. Meanwhile, Caitlin had begun a new life in Dayton. Word came that she had started working as an office clerk at a real estate company run by their parents' friends. She had completely cut ties with the family home, and prospects for reconciliation with their parents were slim. Her name would surely be removed from the Christmas card list. "Won't you see your sister anymore?" one day, Sarah from next door asked. Linda continued tending to her garden roses as she quietly answered, "I think it's time for each of us to walk our own path." Daily life gradually regained its tranquility. The morning light remained as beautiful as ever, and the garden roses continued to bloom unchanged. Only now, a new strength dwelled in Linda's heart as she gazed at them. She resumed attending Sunday services at First Community Church. Though initially conscious of others' gazes, the church community warmly welcomed her back. God sometimes gives us trials. But beyond those trials, there is always light. The pastor's words resonated deeply in Linda's heart. Shopping at Tremont Center no longer held the same awkwardness as before. Rather, she had learned to enjoy her time alone. Selecting favorite ingredients at Whole Foods, leisurely enjoying coffee at Starbucks, such ordinary moments brought fresh joy. Rumors reached her that Thomas had started a new life in Seattle. He had apparently switched to a local IT company for a fresh start. Strangely, Linda no longer felt anger or hatred toward him. Perhaps this was a sign that she had come to accept herself. Her parents continued their peaceful days at First Community Village. Linda visited without fail every weekend, spending quiet moments over her mother's homemade cookies. That warmth gradually helped heal her heart. One morning, Linda discovered new buds on the garden roses. They seemed to be gathering their last strength to bloom before winter's arrival. She saw herself reflected in their image. Even when wounded, new buds emerge. That's what it means to live. Now she possessed such strength and gentleness. If a new encounter came someday, she would accept it as a gift from God. But for now, she wanted to cherish her own life first. She could live true to herself, without being bound by marriage or children. She furnished the house with new furniture and redecorated the rooms. She hung paintings by her favorite artists on the walls. It was like a small declaration for her future life. At night, Linda smiled quietly as she gazed at the stars through the living room window. Life sometimes takes unexpected turns. But that too is part of her story. Tomorrow would bring another new day. It would surely be a step filled with new possibilities. Linda had come to believe in that.